The 2026 season will see 11 teams on the grid for the first time since 2016. Now that season saw the introduction of the Haas team, while 10 years later another American team of Cadillac will join the grid. We will have to wait just a little bit longer to see how they'll perform, but in the meantime we have the F1 game to imagine how it could go. So I loaded up F1 25 MyTeam, created a brand new Cadillac Formula 1 team with both Valtteri Bottas and Sergio Perez coming back to help. I then used this incredible livery mod and simulated through the next 10 seasons of Formula 1. Now before we begin, make sure you drop a like if you enjoy, subscribe if you haven't already, and think about becoming a channel member by clicking the join button below. The first season of the simulation would line up with the 2025 season, however McLaren wouldn't be the ones to top the standings. Instead, we see the Ferrari team take their first constructors title of the video. Cadillac entered the season earlier than real life and recorded a decent P8 finish, showing potential of rising to the top. Both Bottas and Perez finished in the midfield, with Bottas in P11 and Perez just behind in P13. The real-life champion Lando Norris was only able to finish in third place this time round, with one of the other championship contenders down in P5. The runner-up spot was secured by Charles Leclerc, however no one was able to get anywhere near the latest champion of Max Verstappen. He dominated the season after winning a total of 10 races and finished 78 points ahead of Leclerc, who only won twice. Mercedes driver George Russell also won twice, before Lando Norris and Lewis Hamilton just won once. A very small silly season started after Lewis Hamilton decided it was time for him to retire, allowing Carlos Sainz to return to the Ferrari team. Pierre Gasly makes his move over to Williams, allowing Alpine Jr. Paul Aron to make his debut with Alpine next year. Now both the chassis and powertrain departments are then hit with the first regulation changes of the simulation. Ferrari failed to retain their title, being overtaken by both Red Bull and Mercedes, who would see them be the victors in the second year. Cadillac made some important improvements, which saw them move up to P5. Now only slight improvements were made in the driver standings, with Perez moving up to P10 and Bottas dropping slightly to P12. Lando Norris dropped out of the top 3 this year, with Charles Leclerc also dropping after he finished in third place. George Russell took advantage of the title winning Mercedes and finished in the runner-up spot, but still would lose out by 3 points, as the Dutchman of Max Verstappen managed to take his 6th championship title in a row. Wins were more varied across the season, as the champion Verstappen only managed to win 7 times, while runner-up George Russell managed to win 4. Both Leclerc and Norris continued to win races, as Leclerc won 3 and Norris won just twice. Now joining Lewis Hamilton in retirement will be Fernando Alonso, with Valtteri Bottas leaving Cadillac to join Aston Martin. Esteban Ocon moves over to the newest team, with Paul Aron joining Haas after just a single season with Alpine. Now none other than Charles Leclerc is going to move to Alpine, only God knows how that's happened, but UKESIDE will join Ferrari, Antonelli joins Red Bull, and Oscar Piastri swaps to join the Mercedes. Gabriel Bortoleto is able to move over to the McLaren team, as Zachary Sullivan takes the final seat at Kick Sauber. Now the powertrain department is hit once again, this time it is joined by the aerodynamics department. Now I don't really know how this has happened, but in just the 3rd season, Williams rose to the very top of the standings and secured the Constructors' Championship, much like they did in the Ford simulation. Alpine also made some major improvements as they jumped from P9 all the way up to the runner-up spot. Cadillac returned to finishing in 8th place, with Esteban Ocon in 13th and Perez just behind in 14th. Now both drivers for the champions of Williams finished just outside the top 3, and just behind George Russell, who dropped to 3rd place after finishing as the runner-up last season. Max Verstappen fell to the runner-up spot, failing to secure a 7th world title. Instead, we will see a brand new champion. Now it is a shock one, and you may have realised who is missing already. Charles Leclerc will be the newest world champion, which isn't too surprising, but he managed to do it in an Alpine. Now, he also managed a 70-point lead over Verstappen, despite only winning 5 times compared to Verstappen's 4. George Russell also managed 3 race wins, Pierre Gasly managed 2, while both Alex Albon and Valtteri Bottas won on just a single occasion each. And there will be a lot of drivers moving teams at the end of the season, sparked by the retirement of former champion Max Verstappen, alongside the departure of reigning champion Charles Leclerc. Now before we get into that heavy section, Ferrari and Aston Martin swaps drivers, which sees Tsunoda and Bottas swap seats, much like Piastri and Antonelli, which sees Kimi return to Mercedes. The open seat left by Verstappen is then taken by Lando Norris, meaning Lando and Piastri will team up once again while driving for Red Bull. Sergio Perez will leave the new Cadillac team and return to McLaren, with Nico Hülkenberg joining Cadillac. Oliver Behrman fills the seat left by Leclerc, allowing Isaac Hadjar to move to Haas. Jack Crawford will then come in to debut at Kick Sauber, while Pepe Marti enters the sport to drive for the Racing Bulls. Then the aerodynamics and powertrain departments will once again see regulation changes. 4th season and a 4th different Constructors' Champion, as Red Bull rose to the top of the standings, while the former champs of Williams fell to P4. The Cadillac team remained in 8th place, just ahead of last season's runners-up Alpine, who fell all the way down to P9. Still no major moves in the driver standings however, with Verstappen dropping to P16, while Hülkenberg came in for a P13 finish. With Ferrari returning to the top end of the standings, their newest driver Valtteri Bottas is able to enter the top 3 for the first time, as he finished 18 points behind George Russell, who moved up to P2. Red Bull returned to winning the Drivers' Championship, with one of their newest drivers securing his first world title. Now with Piastri down in P6, Lando Norris would be the one to rise to the top to win his first ever Drivers' Championship, outscoring Russell by just over 50 points, and they were scored in the race wins, after Norris's 6 wins would beat Russell's 4. Valtteri Bottas, Pierre Gasly and Oscar Piastri all managed to win 2 races each. There will be another huge driver market, with Nico Hülkenberg retiring, while Alex Albon, Paul Aron and Esteban Ocon all lose their seats in Formula 1. Gabriel Bortoleto will be the first to move as he joins Williams, while former champion Charles Leclerc returns to drive for McLaren. Cadillac will need 2 new drivers, and they choose to sign Yuki Tsunoda and provide a debut for Zane Maloney. Yuki leaves Aston Martin, who signed Liam Lawson, allowing another debutant as Victor Martin signed to the Racing Bulls. After Paul Aron has left Haas, Zach O'Sullivan joins the first American team, while Pepe Marti joins Kick Sauber, and Richard Verschoor comes in to partner Martins at the Racing Bulls. And with all the seats filled, a single swap then occurs, with Carlos Sainz and Kimi Antonelli swapping seats for Season 5. The powertrain department is then once again targeted with some regulation changes. Red Bull were able to retain their Constructors' Championship, with McLaren finishing as runners-up after jumping from P5. Cadillac had some minor improvements and moved up to P7. Their drivers did gain a couple positions over their predecessors after Tsunoda finished in P11 and Maloney had a solid debut season for P14. Bottas unfortunately fell out of the top 3 this season, while his new teammate Kimi Antonelli took his Ferrari into 3rd place. Last season's champion Lando Norris failed to retain back-to-back titles, only just finishing ahead of Kimi Antonelli. Now this season saw Charles Leclerc return to the very top of the standings to win a 2nd world title, but this time driving for McLaren. Now it wasn't necessarily a runaway title, with just under 40 points separating the top 2, after Leclerc won 5 times and Norris only won 3. On a similar level was Kimi Antonelli and Oscar Piastri, who both won 3 times each, while George Russell was only successful twice. Not as many driver moves this season, with just a single swap occurring at Williams, as Alex Albon comes back to replace Gabriel Bortoleto. Isaac Hadjar also returns to the Racing Bulls after he swapped seats with Richard Verschoor, and 3 of the top 5 will move teams, with champion Charles Leclerc heading to Red Bull, replacing Piastri, who heads to Mercedes, after George Russell signs on to drive at McLaren. Now the powertrain department is hit once again, this time combined with the chassis and durability departments. For the 3rd season in a row, Red Bull was successful in retaining their Constructors' Championship, with the gap ever so slightly increasing. Cadillac have finally figured out how to make a decent car and shot up the standings, as they finished in P4. Maloney jumped up to P9, while Tsunoda saw major success after finishing just outside of the top 3. Kimi Antonelli remained on the edge of greatness, and once again finished in 3rd place. The runner-up also stayed the same after Lando Norris failed to win a 2nd title, being beaten by McLaren for the 2nd year in a row. But with Charles Leclerc now driving for Red Bull, another brand new champion has to be crowned, as George Russell took his McLaren to the very top of the standings. Around just 40 points separated Russell and Norris, but they would also be separated by 5 wins, after Russell won 7 and Norris just 2. Kimi Antonelli and Charles Leclerc also both won 2 races, much like Yuki Tsunoda, who recorded Cadillac's team's first victories in Formula 1. The season then ended with a single race win for Oscar Piastri. We now return to another wild silly season after Zane Maloney, Alex Albon, Carlos Sainz and Zach O'Sullivan all lose their seats in F1. Former champ Charles Leclerc moves over to the new Cadillac team, with Oscar Piastri replacing him at Red Bull, while Oliver Behrman gets promoted to Mercedes. The reigning champion George Russell returns to his former team of Mercedes, while Victor Martins moves over to the open Haas seat. This leaves 4 open seats, allowing Paul Aron to return to Alpine, Esteban Ocon to return to drive for Williams, Gabriel Bortoleto returning to McLaren, and the final seat at the Racing Bulls is then provided for Enzo Fittipaldi, who will make his debut next year. The powertrain department is then once again hit with some regulation changes, this time alongside the chassis department. For the first time since Season 1, Ferrari have returned to championship glory, overtaking Red Bull, who are dropped to runners-up. Cadillac are now on the verge of greatness as they move up to 3rd place, just 13 points behind Red Bull. Yuki Tsunoda fell from 4th place down to 7th this season after being destroyed by his teammate. Kimi Antonelli remained in 3rd place for the 3rd season, much like runner-up Lando Norris, who once again finished in P2. George Russell fell down to P5, meaning a different champion will be crowned, and it will be a returning one. Charles Leclerc has managed to add another title to his career, providing the first title for the new Cadillac Formula 1 team. Despite this, Lando Norris would actually win the most races across the season, after he won 4 times, compared to champion Charles Leclerc, former champ George Russell, and Valtteri Bottas, who all won 3 times. The other Ferrari driver of Antonelli managed to win twice, while Oscar Piastri won just a single race. The only driver losing their seat this year will be Isaac Hadjar, with his seat at the Racing Bulls being given to Victor Martins. Jack Crawford moves over to Haas. Lance Stroll joins Kick Sauber, with the open seat at Aston Martin providing a return for Zach O'Sullivan. Cadillac's Yuki Tsunoda will leave the sport for now, with Gabriel Bortoleto moving over to Cadillac. Oscar Piastri makes a return to McLaren, with Oliver Behrman moving to Red Bull. The final open seat is left at Mercedes, which is given to Yuki Tsunoda to keep him in the sport. Regulation changes will impact the powertrain department yet again, with the aerodynamics department also being hit. Improving on last season's Drivers' Championship, Cadillac have earned their first Constructors' Championship of the simulation, with Ferrari finishing as the runners-up. Gabriel Bortoleto had a strong first season with the team as he finished in P4, around 30 points behind Oscar Piastri, who took his McLaren back up to 3rd place. Kimi Antonelli ended his streak of finishing in 3rd and moved up to the runner-up spot, but will once again finish behind Charles Leclerc, who managed to retain his championship title for Cadillac. Now, Leclerc did end the season with the most race wins this time after he won a total of 5 races, while runner-up Kimi Antonelli and George Russell both won 4 races each. Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris and Gabriel Bortoleto all won once, marking it the first season which both Cadillac drivers have secured race wins. Yuki Tsunoda will leave Mercedes after a lackluster season, with Paul Aron taking his spot, while Taylor Barnard is the latest driver set to make his debut and will do it with Alpine. Liam Lawson will also unfortunately lose his seat, with Jack Crawford moving over to Aston Martin, Pierre Gasly moving to Haas, and Sergio Perez moving to drive for Williams. Lando Norris moves back to McLaren to partner Oscar Piastri, but then he takes Lando's seat at Red Bull. Franco Colapinto will instead partner Norris, with Richard Verschoor moving to Alpine, allowing Isaac Hadjar to return back to the sport to drive for Haas. For the first time in a long time, the powertrain department isn't hit with regulation changes. Instead, it will just affect all the other ones. Cadillac are unable to retain their Constructors' Championship, with Ferrari once again moving to the top of the table. Cadillac then fell to the runner-up spot, with driver Gabriel Bortoleto finishing in a solid P5. Ferrari driver Valtteri Bottas moved back up for a solid P3 finish, just behind the reigning champion Charles Leclerc, who unfortunately failed to win a 3rd title on the bounce. The latest champion is a new one for this simulation, but if you've seen any other simulations it will come as no surprise to us who won here. Of course, it was Kimi Antonelli, while driving for Ferrari, and he won his first championship in the penultimate season of the decade. A very strong performance from the Italian after he took 8 race wins across the 16 race season. 4th place Lando Norris managed to win 4 races, while runner-up Leclerc won 3, and Sergio Perez made a surprise entrance to take his first race win since his Red Bull days. Though only a single driver will miss the final season, as the Racing Bulls decide to drop Victor Martins in favour of signing Richard Verschoor, while Liam Lawson returns to drive for Alpine one last time. Cadillac have made some major business decisions, swapping out both drivers, one to Red Bull and one to McLaren, with Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri finally teaming up again at Cadillac in their final season. And in the powertrain and durability departments will see the final regulation changes of the simulation. The final season saw Ferrari remain at the very top of the Constructors' Championship, with Cadillac remaining in P2, but quite far ahead of Red Bull in 3rd place. Oscar Piastri just missed out on the top 3 by literally a single point, as his 179 points were beaten by Charles Leclerc, who scored 180. Lando Norris managed to keep a Cadillac car in the runner-up spot, but as typical in these videos, Kimi Antonelli remained at the very top of the standings to win back-to-back world titles. This season actually saw 8 different race winners, which I believe is actually a first for F1 25, with Kimi Antonelli winning 6 times, while Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc and Gabriel Bortoleto all won twice. The rest of the race wins were then split between Oscar Piastri, George Russell, Valtteri Bottas and Franco Colapinto, who would win his very first Formula 1 Grand Prix. And that's going to be the end of the simulation with the addition of the Cadillac Formula 1 team. Now, could this be a prediction or just a spoiler for the next 10 years? Now let's combine all the 10 seasons so we can have a look at the stats and the numbers. 5 different constructors were able to secure a championship, with the newest Cadillac team being successful once, just like Mercedes and their customer team Williams. Red Bull was successful on 3 different occasions, but Ferrari would go down as the most successful team after winning 4 Constructors' Championships. There was also 5 different Drivers' Champions, with Max Verstappen adding another 2 to his career. Lando Norris and George Russell would win their first, while Kimi Antonelli won twice, and Leclerc managed 4 drivers' titles, winning at 3 different teams. Throughout 160 races, 14 different drivers took the flag first, with Sergio Perez and Lewis Hamilton winning just once, much like Franco Colapinto and Alex Albon, who achieved their first victory. Yuki Tsunoda was the only driver to win twice, Bortoleto won 3 times, while Pierre Gasly managed to win 4. Valtteri Bottas won 7 upon returning, while Oscar Piastri managed 9. A big jump up to Verstappen, who won 21 times, while both Norris and Antonelli ended the simulation with 25 wins each. It would then end in a tie between the top 2 drivers, with both George Russell and Charles Leclerc managing to win a total of 30 races each. That's going to wrap up another video on F1 25. Now make sure you drop a like if you enjoyed and subscribe if you haven't already. There will be linked in the description to the Cadillac Formula 1 mod I've used, as well as my social media platforms including my Discord server, which is the best way to receive updates about uploads on the channel, but also to talk to me and other members of the community. But that is going to be all from me today, so I hope you have a good day, evening or night, wherever you are, and goodbye.